Welcome to another episode of the Dental Insiders with your hosts, Matthew Petchel and Michael Dunn. The Dental Insiders is a podcast for dentists, dental team members, and industry professionals. We'll share stories and lessons from clinicians and industry visionaries with the goal of providing an entertaining and informative look at the industry we share.
Welcome back to the Dental Insiders and our guest, Darin O'Bryan, who we were going to do just one podcast, but he's just so dang interesting.
Right.
I mean, we started talking about Sasquatch, we got sidetracked, and now it blew everything up. So now we're
a little bit of torture mixed in.
Now we're going to have to just make this a series of podcasts. And so we talked about technology. We talked about kind of the how do you stay refreshed and everything. I thought things were really interesting. And another interesting kind of component facet of you is that you work with your wife, Cece, in the practice, which I think is pretty common. I don't know if I had to guess, I'll tell you what, let's all guess. Everybody who's listening, everybody who's in here, what percentage of practices are a husband-wife kind of tandem, whether it's two doctors or a staff or an office manager. I think the number is like 25%. You think
25%
I think
have a spouse in the practice?
Say there's a spouse. Single practice, not group practices.
Right.
So take the groups out, 25%.
I think it's higher than that. I think it's 30%.
Darren, what do you think?
Well, I'm trying to think of the people that I know. Actually, the vast majority of them do not have their spouses work with them. No. I only know of all the groups of all the dentists that I know, I only know of a handful that actually do.
Okay.
Because either the spouse works somewhere else or they realize it would be a very, very bad idea.
Right.
So maybe, well, I'm not going to ask that question. Maybe there's an opportunity for a Dental Insiders survey here.
I think we could do a survey. And I think and maybe there's already some data out there, but we'll report back.
Yes.
Everybody has.
Cece would probably be the best one to ask because she's on a forum that is just wives of dentists who are their office managers.
So when we will.
So there's not only a survey, there's a reality show waiting to happen there.
There is. Wow.
The wives of dentists.
So talk about that. So CC, it manages your practice.
Yes.
Talk about should they work together, and how do you guys make it work?
Well, before you get there, was that the plan from the start? Was like, hey, we're made to work together. You are the half to my whole. We're perfect together. Or was it like a budget thing?
So what ended up happening is when I moved out to Oregon, I bought a small practice. The previous dentist was still going to work for about another 4 or 5 years. And we were going to share the hygienist, share the front desk, but I didn't have an assistant. And so what I did is on the 30-hour drive from Minnesota out to Oregon, I taught Cece everything I knew about dentistry. So we actually had a lot of downtime because it really didn't take that long. And then when we got out there, she was my dental assistant. And then we were running the books, but the books were so small because I was working 3 days a week. I was seeing maybe a few patients a day, but my overhead was, 25, 30% tops. I do one root canal and make my budget for the day. So it was really easy going because I shared all the expenses with the previous doctor. And so she started out as my dental assistant, but we had 2 kids and we said, well, you'll just keep managing the books on it. But we already had a front desk who was handling most of the EOBs and stuff of that nature. So really she kind of fit a niche that was more of a necessity at that point because I didn't know anybody here. I was just moving out. And then it blossomed into her actually managing the practice 100% after the first year or so. First, she was just doing most of the bookkeeping. She handles all the finances in the household anyway. She's the brains of the organization. I'm just the beauty and the talent. And so within the dental industry, I took care of all the clinical aspect and looked as I'm more the CEO. I have the vision. I have the strategy. Here's where I want to take the practice. Do I have the money to do this? am I still able to eat tomorrow? That's what her job was to balance everything. Then she learned the ins and outs of the industry from the insurance side. And that's really how it started. It was more of a necessity to start with and then blossomed into a full-on relationship. And we work really well together. I mean, we are 2 halves of a whole, so we work really well. Would every dental couple be able to do it? No, it would be pretty much a guaranteed divorce for some. It really depends on their personalities. If they are the kind of household where everything is shared anyway, where they don't have problems divvying up the daily duties at home, they're probably going to be okay in a dental office. But if it's one of those situations where the husband and wife kind of bicker back and forth at whose job it is to take out the garbage or take the kids to school or what have you, that's probably going to be a little bit more of a challenge when they get into the professional end of things.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely interesting, and when we have her on as a guest, we'll get that statistic,
and we'll talk about you being the beauty and in the practice and
get. I'm going to get punched later. That's awesome.
Yeah,
she's heard that line before, so it's not going to come as a surprise. I mean, there are definite benefits to it. I know that she's got my back. She's handling the money. She can't. What's she going to do? Embezzle money from me and do what with it? Put it in my account? Well, that doesn't make. I mean, that we don't have to worry about embezzlement. I get to sleep with my office manager, not get in a sexual harassment suit against me. So I mean, there's all sorts of things that really work out to my advantage.
Right. Lots of pros there.
Well, lots of pros.
So we're going to switch gears here and talk about education, because you mentioned very briefly in the first part of the interview that that you do. I think you phrased it something like some teaching. Yeah. But you don't just do some teaching. I mean, you're not the kind of 9-to-5 guy, work on some teeth, go home and have a beer. I mean, you actually lecture all over the country. Yes. So, how do talk to us about that and what do you lecture on? And then maybe what have you learned through this experience of being an educator?
I can tell you the one thing that I learned really quickly is be careful what you ask for. When I first got it started, a good friend of mine, Samir Puri, who started Sarek Doctors, said, be careful what you wish for. Because I was like, I'd like to get on the road. I'd like to do a little bit of lecturing. And now I traveled 28 weekends last year lecturing all over the country, up into Canada. I've been all over the world actually doing it. I love it. I enjoy the teaching aspect. If I wasn't a dentist, I could see myself actually being, a college professor or something. I like teaching at a higher level. I could not do high school or below because I'd want to taser all of the children. But, I could definitely teach at a collegiate level or higher. So I kind of felt a lot of stuff happens kind of by happenstance in my life. I actually fell into it a little bit. They needed a trainer for Oregon to teach Sarek, and I had already kind of dove in and got really into the technology. And so when they needed a trainer, my name got thrown into the hat, and they do the trainings on Fridays and Saturdays. And the other trainer actually was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he wouldn't work on Saturdays. So I ended up doing all of the trainings for Oregon. That got me to some training meetings. I then met one of my best friends, Rich Rosenblatt.
Rich.
Yeah, we all know Rich. Much to the dismay of my liver, I now know Rich. So when I met him, he goes, I'd like to see you start lecturing. I think you got what it takes. And he introduced me to everybody. And that kind of started the ball rolling. And I ended up getting hooked up with Sirona and Patterson and various other companies, Ivoclar. And I do a lot of lecturing on a variety of topics, from the technology of Sarek and Galileos to some implant stuff to cosmetics to composites for various companies. So it sort of steamrolled really fast.
Yeah.
Do you think that all dentists should lecture or teach or speak in some way? Does it in some way, does it make you a better communicator in the practice? The whole
it definitely does. Unfortunately, if you talk to dentists all the time. Yeah. How many of them could see actually standing up in front of a room and not actually putting everybody to sleep?
I don't. That's a good question.
Another survey question.
But it's if everybody's different, right? There are people on the high end of energy and there are people on the lower end of energy. But do they all? Is it? Would it be better for? I ask a lot.
I think there's a question behind your question, and I think
please share it.
Well, I think what you're getting at is, in this process of teaching someone else, and let's say not just standing from a room, but maybe it's online, maybe you talk about forums where you're advising people. In that process, are you also, by educating, are you also yourself learning things that you
absolutely
into your practice in terms of communication? Right. Is that your question?
It is. It totally is. You've said it in a different way, which I think is great for the people who my voice is at a different frequency. And yours is at the other one, but yeah, but more it's everyone. I think everyone can be a teacher or can at least share some knowledge in some way. And maybe someone can't get up in front of 1,000 people and command the room, because there are some people who do that. Maybe there are some people that do it either on a forum or do some way. And in that interaction, it helps them feel good about, talk about that energizing, feel good about what they're doing, the practice, learning from others and growing as a person. Because we talk about this too all the time, is we're all in this industry, right? I mean, you're in it because you got no other options. We already
got no other choice, right? Exactly.
We're in it because, well, really the same reason.
Yeah. I was about to say.
And we want to make the industry better. We're totally in this for let's make it better. Let's make people better and make the experience better for the end user and all that. So, all right, I've talked long enough. Somebody else take this, would you?
I think there's almost two separate points to be made here, and you each had your own points. Michael, yes, without a doubt, in teaching other people, I've learned a ton of stuff. Whether it's a simple technique that somebody comes up to me and says, hey, have you ever tried this? And I go, wow, that's really cool. I haven't. Let's do that. On the online forums on SericDoctors.com, there's always somebody coming up with something. There's 17,000 users on there. Somebody's going to think of something somebody else hasn't. They post it, and a bunch of us go, holy crap, that's really cool. So we always have that. But as far as I think, Matthew, what you're talking about is in the process of speaking, am I better able to communicate to people? Ergo, can I communicate better to my patients? And absolutely, without a doubt.
Right.
If you look at when you have to speak and communicate your ideas, you learn to be more succinct about it. Dentists, more than anybody I know, oversell their stuff. They talk to a patient, they talk to them ad nauseum about it, to the point where if you came in and just had a very brief, almost scripted, this is what you say to the patient when they need a crown. Dentists will spend 10 minutes explaining why they need it. The patient's like, do I need the damn crown or not? What do I need? Just tell me what the hell I need. Don't give me the explanation of how you're going to seal the dental tubules off. Just, for God's sakes, what do I need? And so that communication part is a huge deal, because they teach us nothing in dental school about communication or business.
Right.
And so in the process of speaking, you get feedback on how you're doing. And by then improving that, you're able to communicate better to people.
Right.
And when you communicate better to, even in a small group setting, maybe you're only doing small hands-on, small study clubs. You're in front of them communicating, and you realize when you start getting a little long-winded that you go, I need to just shut up, back off, and let them assimilate the information that I just gave them.
Right.
If I keep talking, they're going to glaze over and I've lost them. That happens in an audience, whether it's 500, 50, or the person sitting in your chair. That ability to connect with them and communicate properly is absolutely key to have them feeling comfortable to going through with whatever it may be, whether it's a sales lecture, whether it's hey, you want to incorporate this technique in your practice, or, hey, you really need this work to get done or you're going to have a problem.
I think Darin did a better job of reading my mind than you did.
Okay, well,
so now
you're out. Yeah,
you're
I
out.
appreciate that. Just move.
Okay,
it.
welcome
And on the next dental podcast, Matt and Darin will be speaking to.
No, that's exactly what I was kind of getting at.
Yes,
we want everybody to be. I think it starts. If we want the patient experience to be better, we've got to get them to accept treatment plans, right? That we know are right. And in order to that, we got to be better communicators. And so how does that happen? And there's lots of ways,
right? And it was addressed.
Darin communicated it very eloquently,
and succinctly,
almost like he's done this before.
Almost like he's done this before.
Yes. Almost like I've done it before.
Yes.
So, as this educator, as this master of technology, as this guru of 3D, I'm sure that, oftentimes other dentists will ask you about incorporating new technologies or techniques. So what advice can you give people out there that might be thinking about a technology? What do they need to consider before maybe jumping into something?
There's really three hard, fast rules that I look at. And that is, does it make me a better dentist, or allow me to do better dentistry, I should say? Does it make my life, my staff lives, or my patient's life easier? And does it make me more profitable? If I can answer yes to all three of those questions, I buy it. I don't question it. And by doing that, I have no technology sitting in my office that just sits there. I may not use it every day, but when I use it, it makes me more profitable. It makes my life easier. I'm able to do something for my patients I couldn't do before. If I can only answer two of them, then I'll have to look at what two of those are, and is it really worth the price tag? If I can only answer one, it better either make me a phenomenal freaking dentist if it's going to cost me something and not make me any more money or make my life easier. Then I'll look at it, but it really depends on that interplay. But if I can answer yes to all three, I buy it, and because of that, I have no remorse on any purchase I've ever had. The only other one that you can kind of throw in there is, does it market itself? Certain technologies will market themselves, like 3D, like CEREC. Certain things will just automatically draw people into your practice.
Yeah.
Is there a price threshold where if you're unsure if something addresses two or three of those questions, where you say, you know what, I'm going to just put it on the credit card anyway and see how this goes? Or is it, regardless of price point, those three questions have to be addressed?
Regardless of price point. I mean, if it's, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I mean, if it's, a $300 item, I'm probably not going to be too worried about it. If it's a $50,000 item, I'm going to be more concerned about whether or not it answers all three of those questions. And when you start looking at certain other technologies, CEREC, cone beam, that sort of stuff, where you're looking at six figures to invest in it, I'm going to damn well make sure that that it's going to give me some return on investment. It's going to do things for the practice. It's going to do things for me and my life and my patients. So there is definitely a threshold. Could I give you a hard and fast number? Not really. It's more of a feel. Yeah. It's more of where I look at it and go, okay, how much do I really want it? Because there's also, there's some emotional buying occasionally as well, where you go, well, I don't really need it. Yeah, it makes me some money. It makes my life a little bit easier, but God, that's freaking cool. Yeah, that's probably end up in my office anyway. I tend to invest in my office more than I do like driving fancy cars because I'm here more than I'm in my car.
Right.
I've got my nice truck that I drive around to make sure that I can, go to the backwoods where I need to be because that's where my house is, right next to Sasquatch.
Right, and that's that's the vehicle you use for squatching.
So that's where I go squatching.
Exactly. I can't wait to go squatching. I think
here in part two, we've pretty much come full circle to part one.
We have, but I have a question. Last follow-up question. I have two follow-up questions. What's the one word that's written on the whiteboard behind you? Because it must be a very important word.
Actually, you know what that is? It's actually all lists of all that one word down there. It's actually cases that I had to work up. That's my checkoff list back there. So it's actually nothing philosophical or anything of that nature. It's actually a list of cases that I'm supposed to get my ass on and actually get sent out to the lab or get the wax ups done or that kind of stuff.
I thought maybe it said something like "love others, don't judge."
Nothing nearly that deep and philosophical.
No.
Well, I think
question.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually, is there anything that you've bought over the years that we talked to a lot of doctors and they're just like, boy, I'm hesitant doing that because I'm afraid I won't get the staff to buy in on it. I won't be able to integrate it. I won't be able to get them trained or whatever. Anything you bought that you regret or just never got implemented that you learned a lesson from doing?
I'm trying to think. There's really nothing. It's certainly nothing major. I use my CEREC every day. I use my Galileos every day. My Millennium laser I don't use all the time, but it's a nice thing to have when I need it. I don't pull it out every day.
Right.
Those are probably the three most expensive things. The other stuff, chairs, X-ray heads, all that kind of. Schick sensors. I use those all day long. There's no question about that. I'm trying to think if there's actually any technology that I've purchased that I don't use at least semi-regularly enough to go, it was worth the investment.
Yeah.
And I really can't think. There's some products I've bought where I went, oh, that's like a neat idea, and then I don't use them much or at all. But no dental equipment that I can think of that sits in the back and just collects dust.
No major investments or major purchases that are in the closet.
Nothing that I haven't spent more on at a bad night at a bar, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes we have bad nights at bars.
That's right. Today. Yeah. Not today. Yeah. Today's the day.
Yeah. Well, this morning was a great night at the bar for me. And I think on that note, that's going to wrap it up.
That's going to wrap up part two.
Yeah, that wraps up part two of our interview with Dr. Darin O'Bryan from the Coos Bay, North Bend metropolitan area in Oregon. Dr. O'Bryan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for your insight, wisdom, and everything. We appreciate having you.
And for our audience out there, thanks for joining us, and tell your friends and colleagues about the Dental Insiders. Until next time.